Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty and I'm delighted to be joined by Sean Martin and Alison McConnell. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Not bad, Tony. Yourself?
Not bad. Quiet international week, but Celtic never sleeps, does it? We're always trying to conjure up ways of discussing the club. And we did a novel thing today, Sean, haven't we, on the Celtic Way? Alison checking up on our facts there as well. We've published a graphic and a table of the Celtic Way power rankings table. Now, the power rankings is myself, Sean, and anyone who's covered the Celtic game this year give marks out of 10, man-by-man markings to the players. And Sean has wonderfully collated them all. He'll tell you it's not scientific, but he works out the averages, and we've printed the top 20, Sean, haven't we?
That's it, aye. That's it to a T. It is not that it's not scientific. It's very subjective. It just so happens to be collated scientifically more than anything else. But a couple of surprises in there, you would say, based on perceptions. But this is obviously, it's a nice wee barometer of certainly what we think we've seen so far this season, as much as anything else. And most of it, I think people would agree, most of it probably does dovetail with what they've seen themselves on the pitch. But a few surprises. If we're starting at the bottom,
yeah,
I don't know if this is a surprise at the bottom right enough. But there's a qualifier, obviously, which is they've used a fair few players this season, but there's no point in putting the likes of Jullien in, who's not played. And by the same token, the cut-off was 250 minutes of first-team football, which isn't even that much. It's not even 3 full games worth. But it does mean that a few of them aren't in the rankings, which means it's a top 20. So look, Barkas, Bain, Dane Murray, obviously Jullien, ball and goalie skills, Mikey Johnston, none of them make the cut because they've just not played enough. Everybody else is considered. So it's a top 20, nice round number. Number 20.
Bottom of the pile, Alison, is George's Giacomakis. Discuss. It's merely coincidental that he's the bottom of the pile, to be fair.
Well, to be fair to him, I think it took a while for him to come into the team. He was obviously injured, and then trying to come into a winning team and a fairly settled front three. I think it was a fairly inauspicious start for him to his Celtic career too. I'm sure he's lost a fair few points in games. That penalty miss and a few others has probably dragged his average down quite significantly. I think what it would point to is that there's still time. I think it's been a difficult start for him, but I think it's still too early to judge on the last few months. I think he might need a bit of time to settle, but I think it's just fairly reflective of it being quite a difficult opening chapter to a Celtic career.
And Sean, people might be surprised at some of the names in that bottom 10. Abada and Rogic, Starfelt as well. Mm-hmm. You know, so I mean, they're surprises. They would probably expect them to be in the top 10.
I don't think there's other ones obviously there. McCarthy, I don't think anybody would be surprised that he's just above Giacomakis there. Beaton's 18th, right? But the last 2 performances bumped him up because he was 20th the last time, largely due to that 3 out of 10 for the red card against Midtjylland, which just plummets you right away. But he's moved up a couple of spots because his last couple of performances have been impressive. You've got Montgomery, Soro and Ayeti who haven't really played any football, so their ratings haven't moved and they've kind of stayed in that the lower echelons. But you mentioned Abada, he's actually moved further down. I thought he might have moved further up because he was 12th the last time, which I think came as a bit of a surprise because of the raw statistics of the goals that he scored and stuff. But we've spoke about it enough, so it shouldn't really have been a surprise that he's very topsy-turvy. It's very much a peaks and troughs kind of season for him. So he's actually slipped further back to 14th. I would suggest that's maybe due to the form of others as well as his own kind of inconsistent form. Rogic, I know for one my mum will be absolutely raging. He's in the bottom 10. But again, he had a few appearances early in the season. He just wasn't quite at it. You mentioned yourself, I think you done the write up for Rogic. He looked as if he was starting to come into his own again. That Hibs game before he went off injured, he was superb. So it was a badly timed injury for Rogic, I would say, and the same goes for Starfelt. he was making his way up. He moved up a couple of places as well from the last time, and it looked as if he was getting more comfortable. So there's all these things that need to factor into it as well.
Now, the reason we're doing this, Alison, is to collect the Celtic Way Player of the Year come the end of the season. No doubt that will cause hardcore uproar if you're of a certain vintage and you know that band and that song. But it's opinion, isn't it? It's based on what you believe you're seeing and what you think you're seeing. But as we head into the top 10, it's the players that you probably think you would expect to see in the top 10. But maybe the surprising one there is that Ralston is 6th in that table. You might expect him to be higher in the top 3, possibly.
I think he's really come into his own, more so in the last 6 weeks or so. I think it's been a steady climb for him since the season began. I think he still had a few testing moments in qualifiers and early games of the season, but I think his performances, and we've spoke about it regularly over the last week or so since he got the new contract, I think his performances speak for themselves. I think he's gone and nailed down that right back shirt for the time being. I don't know, he won't be giving it up easily. I think he was outstanding on Sunday at Dens Park. I think 3 out of the 4 goals that Celtic scored, he had a hand in. I think he looks like a player who's been reborn. I think if he continues in the same form between now and the end of the season, I think what you've just referenced, I think he would be up there in the top 3, 4, 5.
Do you expect him to get a Scotland call-up as well, Alison, if he continues this rich vein of form? Would you see international honours following this season? Or
I think it becomes increasingly inevitable that when you're playing like that, I think you become very difficult to ignore. I think obviously we know what Steve Clarke is like. You know that Stephen O'Donnell just now has got that shirt. Nathan Patterson's in and around it too. What you would say is that Nathan Patterson, I think he looks like a player full of potential. I think he is an impressive young player, but when you're not playing regularly at club level, I think it becomes a question about whether or not there's a suitability to go into international football. I think if Anthony Ralston is playing every week and playing well, then I think it becomes very difficult to overlook him.
John, you compiled most of these in the top 10. I mean, there's no surprise there to see the top 3, is there?
No, just before we go to the top 3 there, the Ralston thing, I actually thought he was going to be higher as well, but it's because I've got the rankings and the ratings in front of me. It was 3 5 out of 10s in a row that's really done for him. Run about the straddling the last international break, just before and just after. It was a run of 3 5 out of 10 games, and that has totally plummeted. Saying that he's still moved up one from the last rankings, but he would have been even higher if not for that wee run of games, because since then, his last 6 games has been 7-8-7, 8-7-8. I mean, you cannot argue with that. He's a man in form. So I agree with you, Alison. I think there's certainly a case to be made that he should be in the Scotland squad, because the only real argument against it I've read is that this is his first kind of proper season of consistently playing. To that argument, I would say, well, Nathan Patterson's in the squad despite never really playing. So through that logic, he should be in the squad. Yeah,
I mean, you look at let's look at the top 5 then: Jota, Kyogo, McGregor, Carter, Vickers, and Hart. Yep. I don't think anybody would dispute that those 5 players have been the backbone of everything that's been good about Celtic this season, Alison.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the only question mark for me was Kyogo first, or was he second, or was Jota first, or was he second? I mean, I think those two have been the standout performers of the season so far. I think both of them, one, the partnership that they've enjoyed together, I think probably best encapsulated in that game against Ferencváros, the pass that released Kyogo. Yeah. I think it was the vision of it was outstanding, and then the execution of the goal, I think it just showcased the merits of both players. But I think too they have a real understanding on the pitch, which is come to light in recent games, and I think will grow as this season goes on. I think the two of them, when they're on form, I think Celtic become almost very difficult to live with, certainly in a domestic sense, for other teams, because the pace of their movement, the intelligence of the passing, the clinical element from Kyogo in front of goal, I think they just add a menace to Celtic in a forward sense. And I think when they're on song, Celtic click. and Celtic play. I think there's no question for me that those two have been pivotal to fostering the philosophy that Ange Postecoglou wishes to play.
I totally agree with that, and the only thing you said, Alison, as well, about Jota first, Kyogo second. I've declared my hand early on Kyogo and said he's a Scottish Footballer of the Year in November, so that remains to be seen. And Sean was saying to me, well, Jota's going to give him a run for his money. He's certainly given him a run in our own ranking, Sean, but I mean that top five, that was more or less, if what you're watching this season, you would have predicted that, wouldn't you? Maybe Alison's right, the order maybe slightly different, but they would be in your top five, wouldn't they?
Aye, I mean, definitely the Kyogo was top the last time, and it's literally 0.1 of a rating in between them. But Jota's just been a breath of fresh air as well since he came in. So it is no slight on Kyogo that he's not number one for this kind of period. In fact, in the kind of write-up, I've pointed out he's still the only player this season to have got a 9 out of 10 from any of us that have done the games. That was for the Dundee game earlier in the season.
That was from you, Sean, wasn't it? The hat trick.
It was from me, aye. It was from me. I don't know if I'll give another 9 this season, but you never know. But I mean, Jota's consistency has been off the charts as well. He's only played 14 games, remember. He said, I think his third game he got a 5, which is obviously the only game I think you could argue that he's not actually actively played well in. He said 1-6. Apart from that, it's all been 7s and 8s. He's been consistently excellent. We've spoke about him before in terms of the dribbling and the shooting and all that, but I still go back to the Dundee United draw. He was only just in the door, and he was the guy that everybody was turning to that day to try and make things happen, and he almost done it single-handedly, cracking the woodwork like 3 times and stuff. And so there's a side to him that's not just about the flicks and tricks. And so far he's been. I think Tony, you pointed it out, 12 actual goal contributions in 14 games, as much as anything else is worthy of.
Also, isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, 6 goals and 6 assists, Alison. That's you talk about consistency. That's consistent, is it not?
Well, listen, if you want to know the impression that the boy has made, I think you only have to look at the strength of feeling in terms of this buyout clause. That he was barely in the door when people were saying, right, that 6 million or slightly over £6 million already looks like good value. Go and make sure that you're going to sign him up. So I think that's all you need to know in terms of what he contributed. I think I agree with Sean. I just think he's offered something fresh to Celtic, something exciting. I think it's been an impeccable start for him. Abad is the one I was slightly surprised at, because I think he also started particularly well. A boy at 19 coming into a whole new culture and a new team. I thought he settled very, very quickly. His goals were incredibly important early on. And I think he was only really overshadowed in those opening weeks by Kyogo's performances. I'm surprised that he slipped, but in some ways I think it's inevitable when you have a younger player coming into a situation like that to maybe find it tough to sustain. I think Jota's a bit older. He's got the experience of last season of having gone in a loan deal that didn't quite work out the way he would have wanted. He's got that bit of maturity about him now, and probably coming in with a hunger to really make it work.
And speaking of consistency levels, I wanted to ask you both about Callum McGregor.
Aye.
He's actually that consistent that he's going under the radar, isn't he?
That's exactly what I was about to say there. I noticed Frank's put a comment in here.
Yeah.
Pointing out that just the amount of candidates there is to be player of the year. And that's what came to my mind as well, Tony. We've not even mentioned McGregor here.
Yeah.
He's top 3 as well, but we've not really talked about him yet.
And it's amazing that, a player like McGregor, you can talk for 15 minutes about rankings and ratings. He's third, and we haven't mentioned him, but it's just because he's raised his standards so high that he has a bar that he just doesn't fall below, in my personal opinion. Alison, I just think he's a steady 8 every week. I could be wrong on that.
I would completely agree with you, and I would say the same even at international level too. I think sometimes he falls under the radar. I think when you look at that Scotland game down at Wembley in the European Championships last year, and Billy Gilmore got so many plaudits. I thought the boy played particularly well, given his age and status within the team. But on that day, I actually thought Callum McGregor was outstanding that night too, and it was almost a byproduct of the game. But I thought he showcased everything that you'd seen on a regular time for Celtic, week in, week out. I felt for him last season when it must have been such a difficult campaign for everybody, and he was almost trying to drag people through it. This season, I just think he has the right attitude. I think he's just a boy that gets his head down. He's for the good of the team. I think he's very unselfish. I think he's a player that must be a joy to play alongside, because it's almost without ego. I think you see performances that are for the benefit of those around him and for the benefit of the team. But I think he's beyond reproach in terms of performances and in terms of just his ability to link play. And I think the biggest compliment you could give is to say that when you take him out of the team, you really do see where Celtic falter.
And Sean, I think he's been that good that people just expect that now, don't they? And their only comment, if he falls below that kind of standard that I was talking about, it's just it's the norm. It's what Callum McGregor does, kind of thing.
Aye, it's a curse of his own consistency type of thing that you only notice if he's either not there or he does have a kind of off day. Otherwise, it's just a consistent level of kind of excellence. I think what Alison said there as well, I would say, as well as playing alongside, he must be a joy to coach as well, because he's such an intelligent player. I mean, part of the write up for his entry into the rankings there was kind of pointing out that the kind of football that Celtic play now is almost in his image as much as anybody else's. Kind of boundless. He's all over the park. As much as he plays central midfield, he is everywhere. He feels like he's everywhere as well. Technical. He's just you mentioned how he got overlooked with the Wembley performance. I thought his control under pressure, we've seen it time and time again, is exceptional, and just intelligent in general. I mean, he literally gets shifted about between. It doesn't seem like a big deal to be moving slightly further forward in midfield, but the responsibilities are slightly different, and it doesn't look as if he misses a beat at all when he moves, and that's including when he was younger and he would move out to wide left as well. So it must be a joy to coach. I mean, Brendan Rodgers obviously massively rated him, improved him as a player, and I think already you've seen under Postecoglou how much he values him. And don't underestimate the fact that he's had to replace Scott Brown as captain as well. Like that's not an easy thing. I know they're two different characters, and a testament to McGregor that he's not trying to be Scott Brown. He's being his own kind of Callum McGregor. But don't underestimate it. Like, he's had to deal with that and a new manager and 12 new teammates, and he's still not missing a beat.
You can't praise him highly enough. Now, the one other thing I wanted to talk about today, Christopher Jullien. We now have a definitive, or as definitive as we can get, that Christopher Jullien will return to the Celtic first team fold before the end of the year. Now, he's been out since December the 30th, Alison, since colliding with the post against Dundee United, but that's good news, isn't it? Gives Ange more options, but I think his return to the defence will bolster that defence, and it'll give everybody a lift in the Celtic support as well, and it'll give Ange a lift too.
Yeah, without question. I think there's an argument to say he's definitely the best centre half that I think is available to Celtic. I think he'd be one of the best defenders in the league at the minute. I think he's important. I think his leadership and experience is also important. I think it might take him a while to get up to speed, given the length of time he's been out for. Because if you remember, he hadn't actually long come back last season when he ended up out again. So he's missed an awful lot of football. So it will take a bit of time, I think, but certainly I would expect him probably to come straight in. Yeah.
Sean, would you expect him to? Are you looking forward to the end of the year and seeing Jullien's return?
I'm intrigued to see how he fits into the team as well. But I do think, given the way that he's managed the likes of James Forrest coming back from injury, I think it will probably be a managed reintroduction into the team, which I think is only fair to both the player and the team. But no, I think I agree with Alison. I think if you're taking everybody at their full capabilities, he's probably the best defender there. But more than anything else, Tony, you mentioned it, it's options. That would then be 4 genuine candidates for the centre back players. Carter Vickers, Starfelt, Jullien and Welsh. which obviously means that you shouldn't really need to see Near Beaton play at the back anytime soon. But it's good. It's good to have those four. That's a strong four to be able to choose between. It's no longer the way it was at the start of the season, where Beaton's got to be shoehorned in. Young Dane Murray, for all he done well, has got to be called up to fill a gap. It's four very good options.
Alison, those are the kind of managerial headaches that, you know, bosses love. That's what they get paid the big money for, isn't it? To make those decisions and make those calls. So it is going to be interesting come Christmas time and January time to see what Ange Postecoglou does and how he does rotate those four.
Yeah, without question. I think just the fact that you have a choice to make, you have a decision to make, is welcome. I think it keeps everyone on their toes, but it also gives you an element of security that you know if something happens to someone that you're not hamstrung and in the position of putting, you know, square pegs in round holes just to fulfil an obligation to get a team out on the park. I think that kind of unease can spread throughout the team. I think at least when you know you have dedicated players for positions, I think you have options, and it also gives you a call to make on systems. I think it maybe allows you to tweak within games or in other games how you want to approach and how you want to line up, and any changes that you can make within a game too. So it's definitely a welcome addition. He's definitely he's a big player for Celtic. He was a big loss for them, and I think it's definitely a welcome return.
Well, on a quiet international week and a quiet midweek Wednesday, I thought all three of us did well there. I would give us all an 8 in the Celtic traffic for filling 20 minutes there talking about all things Celtic. Thanks for your contribution and comments, guys. We always appreciate it. I've been Tony Haggerty, and thanks to Sean Martin and Alison for your contributions today.
Thank you.